Hello, everybody. This is John and Ben again from Sweetspot Safari. What we thought to do today is a slight divergence from what we normally do. Normally, as you know, we've been talking about balance and trying to find sweet spots within the polarities of the topics we've discussed. We thought we'd do a bit of a recap today on really emphasize why we're doing this and some of the principles and values around what we're doing. And just a very brief recap. Some of the topics we've covered so far were things like going shallow versus going deep, or being shallow, right? Or taking a shallow approach versus going deep. The importance of humor versus seriousness, optimism and pessimism, and a number of other ones. But as I said today, what we'd really like to do is to try and get you a bit more context in terms of why we're really doing this and what this is about. And the key thing, and what's coming out of some of the discussions, is we're finding a common theme around collaboration, around what it does to take and meet us in the middle. And in fact, the last one we did on saints versus sinners, it came out very strongly about the importance of the circle around the yin and the yang and collaboration. So hopefully that will give you a bit more deeper insights in terms of why we're doing this. So we're going to touch on, first of all, some of the values, the things that drive us and things that really have driven us to do this in the first place, and provide some additional context. So the first one is around balance and the importance of staying balanced in everything that we try and do. I'm actually a Libran born in October, and it always reminds me, because my star sign is the scales and balance and everything else, that sort of reminds me in terms of some of the things that drive me. But before I go on to too much more now, I really want to bring Ben in to go really deeper in terms of what we mean by balance. And then we'll just simply cover a few of the other values and then talk briefly a bit about our principles which drive our operating model. And that will be it for today. So Ben, over to you. Let's have your insights on balance, please.
Yeah, just that symbol of the Libra star sign, just it's kind of very, very vivid, and I think it's a really nice visual to illustrate that. There's the way that we see the world and the way that we navigate through the world is constantly in a state of flux. And I think we whether it's our nervous system, whether it's our sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous systems, working in opposites, whether it's yin and yang, which we mentioned in the Saints and Sinners recent podcast. Life is all around, not either ors, but very much kind of balancing opposites. And so, whether it's our mind and body or our nervous system, which I mentioned, whether it's kind of work and play, there is always this kind of sweet spot. It's not either or 100% and 0%. It's really how each of us tries to navigate these opposites. And so for me, that's how I kind of think about balance. But of course, in a world where there's a lot of discourse, where it's one side versus the other side, and we all become more entrenched in our thinking, we forget that we're actually part of the same game. And so actually trying to find that middle ground, that commonality, we're kind of very much focusing on what's different about our ideas and about how we see the world. But ultimately, we're going to have at some point to come into the center and actually try and find common ground. So there's something about balance in kind of conversation, ideas about the world, as well as how we navigate the world, which I think about. But what's your take on balance?
Yeah, I think really very much, all the things that you raised so far, Ben, very eloquently. I think the other thing that came to mind as you were talking, and again, reflecting back on the first 4 or 5 podcasts that we've done, was that we found that there were fuzzy borders. I think when we started this out, we had this idea of exploring polarities as a way, as a means to find the sweet spot, because we both believe in that passionately and vehemently, around collaboration and finding the sweet spot. But as we went deeper and deeper, because things are so heavily nuanced and very contextual, we found in reality that there are very, very fuzzy borders, which in some respects is a good thing, because, I think that having a fuzzy border, it doesn't mean that we are in any way ill-defined. It just means that there's a greater opportunity for collaboration because the hard border doesn't exist. And this was something, again, we talked about the other week, because very much a lot of these concepts are seen through your own personal lens. And we all know that people have very much, sort of different lenses. So I'm very energized about what we've seen and what we've done so far. And the fact that I believe we are staying, true to our values. And we know we both had numerous discussions about the importance of staying true to that. And I think that probably leads into our next value about authenticity and congruity, which I think is something very dear to both of us, and particularly me. And I'd like you to come back on that one as well, Ben. But I'm always been a great believer in authenticity. If I look at the relationships that I have, it's very important that I'm authentic and I send those messages out, and the people I'm dealing with are authentic. And I find that quite easy to pick up when people, for whatever reason, by the way, let's clear, we're not going to judge individuals. There are times when people aren't authentic, including myself, for a reason, because we get blindsided by something. But I think generally, we should aim for that level of congruity, in other words, being true with ourselves and also being authentic, because one of the, my beliefs is that without things like congruity and authenticity, and to a certain extent, things like transparency, consistency, other principles and values that we have, is that trust will be broken down. And I think it's an important point that if we break our trust either between ourselves, which hopefully we won't, of course, but trust with our listeners, then we've lost the game. And I think it's very difficult to get that back. And history has shown that trust takes a long time to build. And it's built on some of the values and principles we've talked about, but it's very, very easy to destroy. So those are just my views on congruity and authenticity. So again, Ben, let's have your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think your point about trust is important, and nothing really functions in society without trust, and so everything, I can't remember who the thinker is, but there was a philosopher that said that society progresses when a lot of thinking, a lot of thoughts and actions all become automatic in nature. So basically, that means that we're not having to second guess what other people are thinking or trying to say, and so that I think the less we trust each other, the less we trust organizations, institutions, the more heavy lifting we have to do as individuals cognitively. And so kind of trust is that kind of glue which really binds together society, and it allows us to do things without having to do all of the kind of the research and the heavy lifting ourselves. And so the more distrusting we become, the more we have to think cognitively about every decision we make and every conversation that we have. So it's in some ways our small contribution to this effort of rebuilding trust and being true to ourselves, because when we're not acting ourselves, we're not speaking what we're thinking, actually there's a conflict in our minds. There's a conflict in us which we feel, and that's not good for us, I don't think. So I think it's a really important value. And so then on to the next one, which we've chosen. Again, it's a duo. It's openness and inclusivity. And so about openness, I think that the opposite of openness is perhaps closed-mindedness, and implicitly that sounds negative, but what we're trying to also be is non-judgmental. There's obviously a value in everything in different contexts, but for me, openness is really a curiosity to new information, being kind of open to new ideas, new perspectives, new ways of thinking and doing things in general, and yeah, inclusivity is really thinking about it, for me, a bit more holistically, not necessarily about what people look like, but actually, inclusivity, the whole suite of human nature. So, diversity of viewpoints, diversity of ideas. Actually, how do we kind of bring the richness of diversity into our conversations here on Sweetspot Safari? Because the broader the perspectives, perhaps the more kind of rich conversations that we will have in the long run. So that's a little bit about openness and inclusivity, but obviously interested in your take on what these mean to you.
Yeah, and again, thanks, Ben. I was thinking and reflecting a lot while you were talking, and what comes to me again is some of the principles that we have in coaching around non-judgment and, to a certain extent, collaboration and experimentation. All three principles that we're taught to be, effective coaches, and I think that ties in with directly in with the curiosity and the openness. Is that, without experimentation, we're never going to be curious. The two go hand in hand. You have to be curious to experiment. You have to experiment to feed your curiosity as well. So I think there's a balanced part there that works extremely well. So I think it is very, very powerful. And again, it ties in exactly as you said with the open-mindedness. And I think it all slots together very perfectly. And I think the other thing is, while we're on talking a bit about curiosity and experimentation, I think one of the things that people may have seen already with what we've done with Sweetspot Safari so far is this is a bit of an experiment for us. We had this idea and we brought it out, to the table and hope that people would like to do that. And you'll probably see, the odd glitch in what we've done. I don't necessarily mean in terms of what we've been talking about, but the odd technical glitch. But that's okay, because we also set up a principle is that we didn't want to have what we may call postponed perfection. What we're looking for here is an open dialogue, built on all the principles and values we've discussed, with trust and everything else, and not driven by perfectionism, because I don't think either of us believe to a certain extent in perfectionism. And that links back to the curiosity and experimentation, almost the sort of childhood spirit as well, which we'd like to engender in this. And I think, without going through a very, very long list, because I know when Ben and I came up with this, we could come up with a huge list of principles and values. We're just going to finish this section on candor and respect. And again, links back to some of the things we talked about before. I mean, very important that we are candid with each other. And again, that's linked to open-mindedness and have a level of mutual respect, because I think without respect, certainly for each other, but really have respect for the wider population and the people hopefully we want to get to listen to us, we've got no chance, and we have to respect that and all the views of others, etc. I was at a meeting at the weekend where some proposals were made, and there were counter proposals from other people. My proposals didn't get voted on, but it's not the end of the world. I have to take that and respect people's views. I had my principles that sat behind that, and I think people respected that. There were just differing views, and that's life, and that's how we move on. So I think just to wrap this section up, then, any thoughts you have on candor and respect?
Yeah, I think there's something around the principle that we've talked around is our approach to these conversations through the lens of serious play. That some of these conversations, some of these polarities or contrasting themes, have serious implications. But actually, we can talk about them in a playful way that that shows candor and respect. And so I do like that as a guiding principle. But no, I think we rush to judge our fellow human beings, and I think just offering or kind of basically entering all these conversations with each other with that sensibility towards others, I think is just it's just important. So nothing much more to add to that, John. So it covers pretty much our values.
Thank you very much indeed. I think, again, I would like to come back on that one as well, because this whole idea, as you say, of not judging others is also triggered by our own self-awareness as well, which again is another one of our values. But I love the idea of serious play. I'd love to come back to that one. It reminds me of a video I saw about 10 or 15 years ago, a wonderful guy who's leads orchestra in the US, Ben Zander, who's managed to actually get the most. And if people get a chance, you should see some of his videos out of an orchestra. You can imagine leading an orchestra, a bunch of individuals with all very specific, difficult music skills is not easy, but he had a special talent, through non-judgment, right, through collaboration, of getting the orchestra to perform way beyond their own individual and collective expectations. But it was all built on some of the values we've talked about. It was built on trust, openness, personal belief, non-judgment, and all these wonderful things. So I think there is and there's a level of play. I mean, people say, remember rule number 6, and the whole point is there is no rule number 6. But in reality, what it means is you never take yourself too seriously, which I think is also very powerful and embraces some of the topics that we've talked about. And I think I believe, and I know you do, Ben, that if we can all do this to an extent and have meaningful debate with critical thinking in a humorous way, serious play, as you say, then I think hopefully the world would be a better place. So I don't know, really, Ben, there's much more to say around our values. I don't know whether we want to cover some of our principles a bit, but really the principles do support our values, and it's really to do with the operating model. And it's something that we're going to try and hold ourselves to account to. And again, when we bring in other explorers, I'm sure they will do the same too, in terms of holding us to account, because I think that's the side of the coin as well. Any further thoughts or reflections, Ben?
Yeah. I guess just we're trying to we're trying to find a path forward, and we don't want to have like this really mapped out route, this fixed route. So I think what you can probably sense through our conversations both today and previously, we're kind of exploring ourselves, and finding sweet spots, hunting sweet spots is a work in progress, and we want to obviously do this with other people. So I think recognizing that this is a work in progress, I think, is important. And your point about perfectionism often being a blocker, and actually embracing experimentation and trying things and try to frame things as we go along. This is us learning, in process. And I think just that there's a we're exploring nuance in quite kind of black or white thinking spaces. So I think that going back on your point about critical thinking, I think critical thinking is hugely important, but finding balance, we also need to think creatively and imaginatively, because we also need to try and build what comes next as well. So there's a sense of like for me, identifying problems and thinking critically, but there's also a real space and need for building, creating, imagining different things for the future as well. So so I think sweet spot is really just try to dovetail these opposites, and not necessarily thinking either or, and actually how can we invite you listeners who have ideas about sweet spots you'd like to explore on this journey, and hopefully we've revealed a few of our values and principles which you're interested in and wish to support us. So please get in touch as well.
Yeah, I think thanks very much for that, Ben. And absolutely, and interesting when in your point about the importance of creativity in additional to critical thinking has led us on to one of our future topics, which will be very much around the difference between being process oriented and being creative and imaginative. So again, that's another potential sweet spots topic. So I think that's a great place to finish. And as Ben says, hopefully you've now got sort of an inkling, just a soupçon of what we're about. And we look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to you listening to us and giving us feedback as we go forward, because we're both passionate about this, because we want, you know, more collaboration in the world, which was actually repeated by one of our first explorers as well the other week. So there we are. So thank you very much indeed for listening. Hopefully you enjoy what you've heard so far, and you'll come along to the next topic. So Ben.
Yeah. And yeah, likewise, thanks for joining us, folks. And John, can you just remind everyone of the email address? So if you have a topic in mind, or you're interested in being part of our show going forward, where should they? What's the email address?
Thank you. It's sweetspotsafari@gmail.com.
Perfect. So yeah, please get in touch. Please reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers. Bye.